Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow, I'm out here on the Blue Diamond Highway, and the sky looks really strange. There are all these unusual lights in the sky, and there's a craft at the side of the road. And hey, I see that my friend, that country western singer and stuntman down there, Johnny Sands, and he's talking to those aliens again. Those aliens he met several decades ago. And then there's these Bigfoot creatures and the men in black. This is all very confusing to me. So we're going to have to talk this out tonight. We're going to have to understand what went on back on that road on the way to Las Vegas. And Tim, isn't that what we're going to do tonight?
Yes, that's right. That's because, Tim, the aliens know that Las Vegas has the hottest craps this side of the Rocky Mountains.
Oh, boy. You can bet your life on that, right?
That's right.
Oh, boy.
No, it's and I start saying, I mean, you should know you're there in a beautiful, where's it, Atlantic City?
Atlantic City. We're just rolling the dice, and the big ones here, so we can finance our next big operation. We're going to go into a competition with Elon Musk, and we're gonna build our own spaceship and go to the moon, and then to Mars, and then to Uranus. We're going to get around this whole solar system really well. But enough of this idle chatter here. Because it's the holiday season and we're full of joy, right, Tim?
That's right. Well, full of something, you know.
Yeah.
I'll say it's joy. Sure, why not?
Why not? Have you got your holiday tree up?
Yes, we had to. We put our tree up a little bit early, sans decorations, because we've got a new kitten in the house, and so you got to let the kitten have its time climbing the tree and having its fun, and hopefully get it out of his system before we attempt to hang any ornaments.
All I've got in my apartment is a tiki bar, but I put lights around it for the holiday. I like to be of good cheer, and I play Christmas carols, and we sing and we dance, and we crack jokes and eat nuts, and there you go. Anyway, what did you tell our vast audience here about our guests tonight? Because there are two of my favorite people from the land of ufology that are on the program tonight.
It's my pleasure, and you're right, because tonight on Exploring the Bizarre, our guests are Bill Birnes and Johnny Sands. Now, Bill is probably best known as the guy in the sunglasses from the show UFO Hunters, where he was the consulting producer and lead host. Now, Bill has been producing shows since the 1950s, when he started his puppet show called Future Theater. And Bill's first career was academic, earning a PhD in law degree, and he taught linguistics at Trenton State College. And then in 1983, Nancy, his wife, and Bill started their book production company, Shuttle Lawn Press. Now, Bill is the author of such books as Dr. Feelgood, The Shocking Story of the Doctor Who May Have Changed History by Treating and Drugging JFK, Marilyn, Elvis, and other prominent figures. And I'll have to say, Bill, that is just absolutely a fascinating book. I hope we get a chance to talk about that a little bit tonight. As well, Bill has written The Downing of TW Flight 800, UFO Hunters Book 1, The Haunting of 21st Century America, and his most recent, Edison versus Tesla, the battle over their last invention. Now with us as well is Johnny Sands. Now this Johnny has been on our show before, and Johnny has been performing in the music business as a singer-songwriter as well as performer on shows such as NBC's Today Show, Grand Ole Opry, and in Las Vegas. Sands worked many years with artists like Charlie Daniels, Razzie Belly, Merle Haggard, and the late, great Conway Twitty, just to name a few. Now, of course, Johnny is known because of his really bizarre UFO encounter in December 1975 outside of Las Vegas, and we'll definitely talk about that tonight. So, Bill and Johnny, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Hey, Tim, you forgot to mention Bill Birnes, probably a best-selling UFO book today after Roswell. And
right.
In fact, my lead question to you, Bill, anything new on Corso and proving the case, and any feedback coming in still after all this time?
No, Corso is still one of the best-selling books on Amazon. It's number 6 in UFOs. So, really, the Corso case, I think, has really kind of been resolved. I mean, he was just a very popular figure. He claimed that the United States, after the crash at Roswell, the Army harvested a cache of material, technological material from the downed UFO. And after Truman, who had given the lowest common denominator of this technology to Bell Labs for them to develop the transistor, they didn't know what it was at the time, but it contained the secret of what made the transistors work, basically. It really sat in the Pentagon for over 10 years until it got into the hands of the general then, Arthur Trudeau, under whose leadership Corso filtered the material out into defense contractors in the early 1960s. So that was the story that Corso told, and nobody's come up so far to say it never happened.
Well, now there has been some disputing the fact that the crash at Roswell had anything to do with the development of the transistor.
Right. Well, the transistor, what became the transistor, it wasn't really a transistor yet, had been in development ever since the 1930s. Bell Labs, Brattain, and Shockley had been trying to develop something that would get electronics beyond the stage of Edison tubes, basically light bulbs, radio tubes, that were the switches for electric current. But it wasn't, as the story goes, it wasn't until after the crash at Roswell and the delivery of the first cache of material that went to Bell Labs that Brattain and Shockley actually saw integrated circuits. And seeing integrated circuits and how the integrated circuits were built into their base, they were able to duplicate that base. And that's what enabled them to develop the transistor in late 1947, and it was patented in 48 and 49. So, sure, there were folks who said, look, this is a case of post hoc ergo propter hoc, right? That because it was developed after the crash at Roswell didn't mean it was because of the crash at Roswell. Well, one of the things that Corso said that happened was that by seeing the finished device in an integrated circuit from the UFO, Brattain and Shockley were able to reverse engineer what became something that transmitted current and at the same time was able to resist current, hence the transistor, and that became the switch that enabled the entire world of integrated circuitry to begin.
All right, well, I don't want to spend too much time on Roswell because it's been done and rehashed and so forth, but any of these recent stories that we've heard of impressed you at all? The CIA fellow who claimed that he had some documents and the near fellow who was near death, who told us seeing the aliens and so forth. Anything along these lines that stand out?
No, I think the only thing that stands out, at least to me, that really stands out, is the story of Marion Magruder, who in 1944, when he was a Marine lieutenant colonel, basically was the person who brought radar night fighting to the armed forces, and whose night fighters, he was the leader of a night fighting squadron using radar, were able to defeat the Japanese kamikaze attacks on our fleet. And in the Air War class of 1948, that class of officers was taken to Wright Field, and there they saw both the artifacts from the crash at Roswell. This is 1 year later, or actually 6 months later. They saw the debris from the crash, and then they saw the live alien that the United States had captured from that crash, and Magruder was able to communicate with it. So, I mean, that to me is one of the standout stories of that, and Alan Godfrey's story over in the UK from the 1980s about his encounter with the UFO. Those are the two standout stories to me about personal interactions with extraterrestrials.
Well, it is certainly the stand-all case in ufology, the one that the public seems to be most easily identify with. And I guess, well, I don't know if we'll ever really know. I mean, the stories and the legend goes on of the Roswell UFO crash. Well, Jimmy, you had something to add on that, or?
Well, I was just going to say, and that's unfortunate, because if something ever does happen that it is actually definitively, disproved as being an extraterrestrial craft or whatever, then people will start believing then that the entire UFO phenomena is fake. Roswell has become so synonymous with the UFO mystery that something like that happens, it kind of ends up being like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's just my comment.
Look, for me, I think that the eyewitness you could discount everything, but for me, discounting the eyewitness testimony of Lieutenant Walter Haut, who was the person who delivered the notice that the Army captures flying disc outside of Roswell to the newspapers, his statement made in contemplation of death, an excited utterance, basically, and his statements made to veterans of foreign wars and to some visitors of the foreign press at the UFO International Museum in Roswell, those statements themselves, to me, because not only was he an eyewitness, there are plenty of eyewitnesses. I mean, we can go back to the sheriff, we can go back to the ranchers, we can go back to Glenn Dennis at the we can just go back all the way to the eyewitnesses. But the fact that after all these years, after 40 plus years, Walter Haut signed a legal document in the presence of his attorney, and it was notarized, sworn to and notarized, in which he went through all the steps and then didn't just talk about the crash at Roswell, but talked about the cover-up when Roger Ramey and Colonel Dubose, came to Roswell the day before the material went with Jesse Marcel back to Fort Hood. And there they put in place the cover-up of this crash, actually two crashes. And so that, to me, the reporting on that meeting is probably one of the most important things, because it dovetails, it just fits right in with the story of Jesse Marcel, the story of Jesse Marcel Jr., why Jesse Sr. left the armed services. I mean, everything suddenly falls in place when you see it through the eyes of Walter Haut, who was the person who, quite frankly, was an eyewitness to the entire series of events from the moment that he was ordered to, from the moment that he went to the crash site, to the meeting at the Roswell Army Airfield, the 509th at Walker Field, to the cover-up, to the post-cover-up, to what happened to Jesse Marcel Sr.'s life afterwards. So to me, that's some of the most compelling evidence. Because there's no point Walter Haut would lie. What is the point?
Well, it was the same way that I always thought about Lieutenant Colonel Corso. At the point that his book was published, why would he, the skeptics are always saying, oh, well, he just made this up to, try to, make money or to glorify himself. But at that point in his life, why? That doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense. I was always impressed by Lieutenant Colonel Corso. He just always seemed to be, legitimate to me, despite what the skeptics said.
Well, and then when you realize that the Corso pops up a lot through history of some of these events. I mean, he's not just the Roswell guy.
Right.
He was the guy that gave that testimony to the Senate on the CIA laundering drug money in Southeast Asia. He was the guy who, right after the assassination of JFK, got the Secret Service to put an armed guard around this one hotel where the Speaker of the House was, because he was suddenly in the line. Well, he was in the line of succession, but were something to happen, this person was definitely in the line, and he could have been assassinated. They didn't know. So, and then Corso was the person, like, to me, he put his finger on certain aspects of the Kennedy assassination because he was working for Richard Russell on the assassination committee on the committee that Johnson put together to assess guilt. And he was on the extension call that Johnson made to his mentor, Richard Russell, in which Russell told Johnson that neither he nor Jerry Ford saw that that there was a single shooter, and that there had to be another shooter, that there was no magic bullet. And on that phone call, and these were on the tapes that came from Lady Bird Johnson, that Johnson agreed and said, I don't agree with the Warren Commission either about the magic bullet theory, but if we don't agree with it, then we have to ascribe to a conspiracy of multiple shooters. And if we do that and the finger lands on the Soviet Union, then we have to really do a nuclear retaliation against the Soviet Union. Would you risk the lives of over 40 million people in nuclear exchange for the death of one person who would never come back? And that convinced Richard Russell and Jerry Ford to go along with the magic bullet theory. But in the course of doing the book Dr. Feelgood, that was one of the things that we addressed in the book when we interviewed Paul Landis, who was on the Jackie Kennedy detail in Dallas that day. He was a Secret Service agent. And Landis was walking behind the Kennedy limousine. So this was the person in the closest proximity to the actual event. And he said that the first shot he heard came from over his shoulder. That would have been from the book depository. But he said the second shot, and he said that you're trained to locate where the shots come from. And he said, remember, you're going down into a bowl in Daly Plaza. So it's not as though that you're up where it's clean, so that in the bowl you're going to get sounds of ricocheting and sounds of echoes. But as they went down into that bowl, he said the second shot, he distinctly heard that come from in front of the limousine. And he saw the second shot take off the back of Kennedy's head. And when he looked up, he saw people running across the bridge from the grassy knoll over the bridge. So he said, as far as he's concerned, that second shot came from in front of the motorcade.
Well, you know what, Bill, I just want to say here, Bill, in a couple of months' time, we plan to have on our show one of the witnesses who was running away on that day at Daily Plaza. We just made a connection with a young gentleman who is putting together a documentary film, and he's putting us in touch with one of the witnesses who I believe has never, Tim, am I right, has never made a public statement before?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's another reason to continue to listen every week to Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, we have just a couple of minutes here before we go to our bottom of the hour break here. But I think that, a lot of people have been hoping that the release of some of these FBI and documents about the JFK assassination have, there's been some interesting things come out, but nothing earth-shattering so far.
No, when you look at it, there has to be there has to be a reason why over 50 years after the event itself, why after all these decades, the intelligence services would still keep things on the down low and not released. And my theory is that, again, going back to our Dr. Feelgood book, a year after Kennedy was assassinated, Mary Pinchot Meyer was assassinated in Georgetown. She was killed on the Georgetown canals. And she had been married to Cord Meyer, who was a CIA agent. And when she was divorced at this point, but what happened was folks went to Cord Meyer and said, boy, who killed your ex-wife? And Cord Meyer said the same SOBs who killed the president. That's what a CIA agent said. And then after she was murdered, her sister was Tony Pinchot, who was married to Ben Bradley of the Washington Post. So she was Tony Bradley. And after the murder, Ben Bradley discovered Jim Angleton of the CIA, he was the chief counter spy at the CIA. They discovered Jim Angleton at Mary Pinchot's apartment in Washington. And they wanted to know what he was looking for. And he was looking for Mary's diary. Now, Mary...
All right, Bill, we're going to have to interrupt. Bill, we're going to have to interrupt you here because we have to go to our break. When we come back, we'll bring Johnny Sands into the conversation. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
And welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight, we're talking to Bill Birnes and Johnny Sands. We're going to bring Johnny into the conversation. What do you think, Tim? Shall we do that now?
I believe this is as good a time as any. Johnny, how have you been, Johnny?
I'm hanging in there, brother. That's about it.
What you been doing with yourself?
Well, I'm still doing the music business. I'm doing shows all over the United States. Ain't got out back this way much, but I'm right now down in Florida, and just trying to hang on to the best of life.
There you go. You've been performing for how many years now?
About 52.
50. And what was the first inkling that you wanted to be an entertainer?
When I was about 8 years old, Bill was talking about some of the people that Dr. Feelgood had messed up, but Elvis Presley had made a big influence on me as a young boy. And so at the age of 10, I started doing talent shows and began to win, and I was doing impersonations of him when he first come out. And
did he ever see you perform?
Oh yes, yes. In fact, Elvis and his dad Vernon and his Uncle Vestus. I used to go to Graceland quite often, and yes, we become real great friends.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, we know you, and then you got into doing stuntman routine, right?
Right, and again, I got to work with Elvis. I worked in a movie called Roustabout. I was a stuntman riding a motorcycle in that picture. We done that in 1963, and we did that out in California, there, Thousand Oaks, California. And
well, I just wanted to remind Bill. We were on Johnny and I were on the same program, the UFO Hunters, looking for the I think that was the Men in Black episode, right? That was the last.
It was Johnny's incredible story.
Yeah, and we thought, thank goodness we tracked Johnny down because we had been told that Johnny was deceased. And I said, and then one of my Tim Cridlin out of Las Vegas, who is the fellow who does all the eating swallowing swords and chewing beer bottles and all that.
The torture king.
He said, "No, man." He said, "No, man. I saw Johnny a couple of weeks ago. He ain't dead." So one of the guys from UFO Hunters, I guess producers or somebody, finally tracked him down, and we got him on the show, and we ended up out at the Grand Canyon somewhere, I think, right?
Yeah, yes, we did. Right. It was a fabulous show, and it was really good to see you, Johnny.
It was good to be there, Bill. I enjoyed the show very much, being with y'all.
And
well, Johnny, you have the greatest story of Men in Black, the greatest story. Why don't you retell that for the folks?
Yeah.
Well, it's happened, like you said, back in 1975. So you're taking me back a whole lot of years here, and this is one thing. Before we get started, I never got into it for money. It didn't do anything as far as a turn in my career as far as that goes. And so I've never made any money for doing it. So I've only told the story because it's the way it happened. And I was in Vegas and getting ready to do some shows there. And I was out on the Blue Diamond Highway, which is out to the, I guess it's the south of Vegas there. And that's when I first run into the encounter of it all, about 14 miles out. And I was driving, and I noticed a light in the sky, and it was like setting still or hovering in the sky. And at first I thought maybe they were filming some kind of a movie or something out there. And so I began to look at it, but all of a sudden my car started malfunctioning, and I pulled over and tried to see what was wrong, and the car just stalled. It just quit running altogether. And I got out and raised the hood and was trying to see what was wrong with it. And I seen a flash of light go in the sky, and I looked up, and when I looked up, I could still see this thing hovering. It was kind of shaped like a fixed sphere, kind of oblong, like a cigar, you'd say. And it was real large, and but I could see in the headlights two people walking in the direction of where I was standing, and I started getting the car, but I realized it was I was froze, like my body was like paralyzed, and I couldn't get loose to get away, and they kept on approaching me, and that's when I had my encounter with the two guys that I believe to be aliens, and that's where it led into the story about the Men in Black. When we told about what happened, I wasn't too sure that what I'd seen was real, and so I had tried to
But you did pass a lie detector test.
Oh yeah, I asked for that stuff. I was real concerned, like I said, with what I'd seen, and I checked in the hospital when I got to Vegas because I wasn't too sure what's going on, and I told them what happened. Well, they kind of looked at me like I was a nut, and I said, "Well, it really happened. You know, whether you want to believe it or not." And I have experienced this whole year. Give me just a second here. Have a little breathing problem. Being kind of sick. And yeah, and they called in. Anyway, they called in some people. A guy named R.L. Nolan. He was out of the University of Wyoming, and he worked for the FBI.
Well, it certainly is an incredible story. I mean, it was one of the first that we actually heard a connection between the Bigfoot, for lack of a better name. I mean, these hairy creatures and the Men in Black and UFOs, and of course that's become Tim, would you say, kind of quite common in the UFO field today?
Right. Well, and the thing that also impresses me about this whole situation with Johnny is that here's somebody who, I mean, he had no previous knowledge about the whole UFO phenomena and associated phenomena, yet he had these experiences that are, I mean, basically almost stereotypical of a lot of people's experiences. So, I mean, to me, that says a lot about the veracity of his story.
Hey, now, Bill, when you all these, how many episodes of UFO Hunters were aired?
We did 3 seasons of about 39.
39
of yeah.
And did you ever do a show where you talked about the connection between Bigfoot and UFOs? Did that ever come up?
No, it never did, because we never ventured into the field of cryptozoology on the show.
Uh-huh.
I mean, actually, Johnny was the only witness who talked about that connection.
Well, I'm thinking, now we're having Stan Gordon on, I think in February. Isn't that right, Tim?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, and of course, now they had the flap there in Pennsylvania in 1970. Was it 73?
Yes.
Where
it was it was Kecksburg, 1965.
Yeah, Kecksburg, but there were all these other reports that Stan investigated that involved the Bigfoot type creatures, and the UFO reports were coming in at the same time. In fact, Seth Breedlove, who was on the air a couple of weeks ago with us, he's just done a film about this whole incident where there were witnesses to UFOs in connection with these Bigfoot creatures that were being seen throughout Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania seems to be like a really key area for a lot of this activity. Today we've got the Dogmen. Bill, have you kept up on the Dogmen sightings?
No, I have not been keeping up on the Dogman sightings, but when you mentioned Pennsylvania...
Sorry to have slipped that in. I thought maybe you were, reading the newsletters of the...
in the Dogman. No, but it's funny because I did hear that that in Western Pennsylvania, that there really are a lot of Bigfoot sightings. We spoke to a lot of people at one of the former Bucks County UFO conferences.
Yes.
And they were poetic about. They knew exactly where these creatures were. They knew how to find them. And so I said, well, why don't you lead an expedition into those? And they said they didn't want to do it. It was scary. They were not friendly creatures.
Well, we're told that this Dogman that's been seen throughout Pennsylvania has the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger and the face of a pit bull. which
Oh,
is
it's actually Arnold Schwarzenegger. No.
Yeah, there you go.
it is Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's right. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I've seen a few people look like that down here in Florida.
Working on Expendables 4, I guess, or something, right? Hey, so Johnny, can you continue with the story there about these creatures and the Men in Black?
Yeah, I apologize to you. No, I just hadn't been long got out of the hospital. I had a case of about the pneumonia here, so I got a little breathing problem.
It's going around, and I hear the shot isn't working too well this year. I don't know for the flu and the pneumonia.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, R.L. Nolan was an FBI polygraph examiner, and he gave me a test, and he said, he asked if I really seen two creatures in the desert. Were they pale and white? And I said yes. And he said, did they talk to me without talking through their mouth? And I told him yes. And he said, were these creatures somebody that you knew or seen before? And I said, no, never seen them before. And he said, and you believed them to be aliens? And I said, yes, I did. And he asked a lot of questions. And when he got done, he got up and he looked at the people that were standing there. There were some people from the Aero Phenomenal Research Center out of Tucson, Arizona there. And he said, the man's telling the real truth. He said, everything he's told is 100% the truth. And so, and then I had Dr. Leo Sprinkle, which was a hypnotist that came in, and he did a voice analysis and hypnosis on me. And he again said that what I told was, he said, what the man says he's seeing, he's seen. And so anyway, this Strays Bazaar was really after the encounter. The encounter was enough, but I was at the Sahara Hotel there in Las Vegas, and the manager wanted me to have an artist do rendition of what the aliens look like, and we were doing that, and we were sitting in the lobby of the hotel, and while we were doing it, the artist was asking, well, where do you think they're from? And I said, I have no idea. And two men walked up. They were in black suits, had on black hats, and both dressed just alike, kind of looked like a undercover agent for the FBI, something like the Men in Black on the Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith show. And they said, one of them said, they could be from Sirius. And, of course, I didn't know what they was even talking about. And the man said, what is Sirius? He said, well, it's, I think it's 8.5 light years from our planet. And he said, it's known as a star, but it's also known as a planet. And it's half underwater and half on land. And he said, so it would answer for why they had gills on the sides of the face and nostrils too, because when they were underwater, it's like a fish and used the gills, and when they were on land, they breathed through the nostrils. And so, we didn't know what he was talking about. But when they got ready to go, the aliens had told me in the desert, when they got ready to leave, said, we got to go, but we'll see you again soon. And so these men in the black, one of them reached over and tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, we got to go, but we'll see you again soon. And when he said that, I had a police officer with me from Philadelphia, and the police officer knew the whole story, and he looked at me, and he said, you hear what he said? And I said, yeah. And he said, I'm going to follow him. So we followed him down the hallway, and they went out the side door, and he come back, and he would said, they like disappeared. I mean, just in thin air, they totally disappeared. Well, we didn't know where they went and how they got away. So we finished the artist picture, and we went to his, he had a condo there in Vegas, and we went to it. And on the way, we were watching, make sure nobody wouldn't follow us, because it kind of spooked up a little bit. John was his name, about what was going on. And so we didn't see nobody. And when we got to his condo, a big Cadillac pulled in down at the road, and they rolled the window down on the passenger side. And it was those two men in that Cadillac. And they looked up at us, rolled the window up, and drove off. And so, you know, it kind of puzzled us all. But then the next day, John got a phone call. And it was some people said they were with Dunn Studios out of California. And they wanted to speak with me, that they were doing a documentary on the incidents that happened out on the Blue Diamond Highway. And so John says, well, he's not really caring much about talking about it. And they said, well, we just want to ask you a few questions if you'll take the time. And I said, well, tell them yes. So we went over there. And they were in this big complex building, and second floor. We went up and knocked on the door, and one of them opened the door, and they invited us in. Well, when we got in, there was three men there. The other one where was with him, and another one where he didn't speak. He just stood in the corner in the back of the room.
But these were normal, like, businessmen, right? I mean, they weren't men in black, were they?
Well, they were dressed in black, but they were Caucasian-looking people. They acted real strange. And here was the same men that we'd seen at the Vegas hotel, saying now they were a filming company out of California. And so, you know, I mean, this room that we went in, we went in the living room, was the most unusual thing you ever seen. The furniture was totally bizarre, from like another country, totally from another country.
In what way, Johnny?
Well, it was unusual looking stuff. It was like, I don't know, something like you'd dig up out of a pyramid or something, you know, the weird statues, stuff that stood around it, and pictures that were not really of anything of anybody, but weird drawings on the wall.
But they claimed that they were a production company?
Said they claimed to be Dave Dunn Productions out of California.
But you didn't check at the time if any such outfit really existed. Of course, production companies come and go at a pretty quick, rapid rate anyway.
Yeah, we wouldn't really try. I mean, we wouldn't going to do anything except give them a little information there of what happened, and so, you know, with no reason to get too involved with them. But anyway, they asked me if I do them the favor of going out to the desert where it actually took place and show it to them. And John said, well, I'll go with him. And they said, that'd be fine. And so we met at one of the hotels, and they told me, said they'd meet me in the front lobby. But when we got there, the parking lot was full, and we couldn't get a parking space except way out at the next to the highway. And when we finally got parked, I told John we're going to have to walk to the lobby and find these guys. And all of a sudden, here they pulled up right in front of us in that black Cadillac. And one of them got out of the passenger side and opened the door, and he reached in and he had two, looked like martinis in his hand.
Martinis?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he reached and handed me one and handed John one. And he said, brought you guys a drink.
Hmm.
And so we got in the car with them. They wanted us to get in. We got in the back seat. And I looked at John. I said about the drink. I didn't want that drink. So I actually poured it out in the floorboard. And so John did too when he seen me pour mine out. And we rode out to the spot where I said. And when we got there, I told them it's right here. Well, they kept going. And so when they kept going like that, I said, no, you passed where I'm talking about. And they didn't say nothing. And they went up about 4 miles, and then they made a U-turn and pulled over to the side of the road. And when they did, lights on the other side of the road, I'd say 20 to 30 headlights come on over there. And the driver says, we got to get out, y'all sit still.
Well, that must have really spooked you out.
Well, it did. I told John, I said, hey, I don't like this here. I don't know what this is.
All right, let's hold it right there because we have to go to our top of the hour break. We'll continue this story when we come back in a few minutes on Exploring the Bizarre. So please stay tuned.
Exploring the Bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
And welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight we're talking with Johnny Sands and Bill Birnes, and I'm hoping that sometime in the show, Tim, we can get Bill to talk about his latest book, Edison versus Tesla. I just happen to have just a mild interest in, Tesla.
I know,
yeah,
because
just a little bit. Yeah.
Just because you happen to be the author of the actually best-selling. I mean, it's been selling. Talk about up there in the ranks on Amazon for the last how many years since the original edition of the Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla came out?
Well, what is like 18 years now?
No way, really?
Yes, 18 years.
Oh man, that's a long time for a book to have a run. I mean,
right.
Seriously. Well, that's one thing about Amazon. I mean, for better or for worse, they do keep a book. They will keep a book in print and circulating forever. I mean, books that would normally have long, outlived their shelf life. Which is what in the bookstore, Bill, about 6 months?
Yeah, books will stay in the bookstores about 6 months to a year, and then then the publisher has to make a decision. I mean, the print publisher has a big decision to make. Do I pay to keep this thing in print, or do I go on reprint to satisfy the chain bookstores? That's the other question. Because the bookstores don't want to have only one book on the store. They want to have a few books. They want to know that the publisher is supporting the book. So that's one of the questions. And then at a certain point, a publisher is going to say, it's more expensive for me to go back on press and reprint these books to supply the bookstores. I'll just let it go out of print. Well, the nice part about Amazon is that because it doesn't matter to them, that they will have ebooks, they will have books on Kindle, they will be able to order books from stock, that they will keep books on hand, and
it's amazing
for 20 years.
Yeah, it's amazing with them. We have customers all over the world, and the majority of them do order from Amazon, and I can see why. They get their books in I always say they get their books quicker than it takes me to get to the post office. To be honest with you, and people all over I don't know if they're printing some of these books. The books on demand when they first started coming out, they were kind of shoddy looking. Now they're the same as the books that you see in the bookstore. But you can't tell the difference between
exactly.
a book that's been put. Yeah, and most of the books like our yeah.
No, we've got a book on Peter Falk that we published ourselves.
Yeah.
That we have it as a print on demand and as an ebook, and the book is selling every month. We get sales reports. We will do one of these retrospective radio shows about the television show Columbo and Peter Falk, and we'll get a few sales. And the fact is, it's a print on demand, so you're not paying for the print. The buyer is paying for the book. It's stored digitally, so there's no inventory per se. And if you're not going to get an advance from a publisher, then
you might as well do it yourself.
That's really a really good way to go. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, we did a book just recently. For the last couple of years, we've been doing pretty much in-house. Where our various associates like Sean Castile and Tim Swartz will work on a book, and we invite other freelancers to contribute the material. But I had a conversation with Reverend Barry Downing, who did one of the original books back, I think, the first year that Van Daniken that came out with Chariots of the Gods about flying saucers in the Bible. It was a very controversial book. So I found out that he had a manuscript that had been laying around for 40 years. I said, well, the Reverend Dr. Downing, get in there, give us a new chapter or two, and we put it out, and it's been selling like it was almost a major publisher. We're very, very impressed by him and by the sales of the book. I was heck, he's doing better than the publisher, doing better than me on some of this stuff. But you have a new book coming out after the beginning of the year about UFOs in the White House?
Yeah, the middle of January. It's a history book. It's UFOs in the White House. What did our presidents know? When did they know it? And it traces the history of chief executives of the United States all the way back before there was a country, all the way back to Governor George Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was really one of the first UFO sightings by the Pilgrims, all the way back in the 17th century. And it actually
what did they see? What did they see?
Well, what they saw, there were two fishermen on the Charles River, north of Boston. The Charles River separates Boston and Cambridge. And there were these two fishermen, and they had a lighter, a small cargo boat. And they saw this hanging light over the Charles River. And they began to row down towards the light. And the next thing they knew, they were back at the beginning of the river. So they would have had to have rowed against the current. They were back at where they started, and they had no sense of the passage of time. They didn't know how they got there. So there's a UFO sighting. It was changing shape in front of them. They tried to get closer to it. They somehow had missing time. Hours later, they became.
I think we lost Bill there for a minute, Tim. We'll have to continue this conversation when Tina, our wonderful producer, gets him back.
Here we are, and Governor Winthrop. Yeah, there I am. And Governor Winthrop called them sober individuals. He said that they weren't lying, they were sober, they weren't given to drunkenness. And he reported that he found this and he put this whole story into the history of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And so that's the first chapter about how these stories began even before there was the United States of America. And then we go to the famous George Washington story of the two UFO sightings he said he had at Valley Forge. One of which was a sighting in which, when he was a lieutenant colonel in the colonial militia from Virginia, the British, during the French and Indian War, were invading Pennsylvania. They were trying to take Fort Duquesne from the French. And George Washington was accompanying General Braddock. over the Monongahela River to invade capture Fort Duquesne, and the Indians shot General Braddock, and George Washington evacuated the general, and one of the chiefs that were fighting alongside the French had Washington in his sights, and he said that he was about to fire at Washington, and he had him dead in his sights, and he saw the image of the Great Spirit around Washington, and he put his rifle down. He wouldn't shoot him and that same Indian chief, Washington said, came to visit him at Valley Forge after the Indian chief had died, and told him he would win the war against Great Britain.
Wow.
And so there are these stories that run all the way from the very beginning of the United States through Abraham Lincoln. Of course, the John F. Kennedy chapter is very long, and then all the modern stories that affected the George Bush administration, the Barack Obama administration, all the UFO stories swirling around the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump election last year. And that's the book, and it's coming out just about a month.
Well, that will be that sounds like a good topic to with all the interest in politics and international dealings today. That certainly sounds like a topic to hit upon.
Yeah, it was a fun book to write, and that's what's coming out. And then I'm working on some other books.
Of course, Bill, too. You know, Christopher Columbus wrote in his diary on his way to the God knows where here that he had a UFO sighting or something had dipped into the ocean before him. So even before.
A week before the flotilla, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, a week before they reached Hispaniola in October, this would be early October, 1492, in Columbus's log, he wrote that as they were approaching, they were a week out of Hispaniola, he saw a bright, shiny object under the water following his craft, and the object shot up out of the water and went into the sky. And he ordered his scribe to write that into the captain's log that they had this sighting. And that was the first USO sighting in North America.
Now, these early sightings, nowadays people, see these things. Oh, well, it's UFOs, alien spacecraft, that sort of thing. What did any of these people attempt, any kind of explanations, back in these very early sightings?
No, I mean, nobody knew what UFOs were back in the 17th century. Certainly not in the 16th century, in the 15th century. And so they just looked at them as really odd portents, odd omens. Columbus saw this as a great omen that he would discover something wonderful when he had this sighting. The sightings in the Middle Ages, the flying shields and the flying crosses, these were all looked at as either good or ill omens. And it really wasn't until, I would say, the 19th century per se, that we began seeing something that people began describing them as different things. One of the stories that I love from UFO Hunters as well as from history was the 1897 Texas airship mystery, where nobody knew what this thing was, but at the time, it was a very conventional craft that a lot of Southwestern sportsmen had. There was a lot of experimenting with balloons back in the very late 19th century. And when the Spanish-American War broke out, there were a number of individual sportsmen, because you have to be very wealthy to have these things, who had these ironclad balloons. And their idea was to navigate them to Cuba and attack the Spanish. And of course, a lot of them went down, and you saw a lot of UFO sightings of these things because people didn't know what they were, and that was the Texas airship mystery of 1897.
Oh yeah, there were a number of newspaper accounts of people encountering these craft, and the pilots saying that they were heading down to help fight the Spanish-American War. And it's like you said, it makes me wonder whatever happened to him. Ended up drowning in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere, I guess.
Right, and these things went down in the case of the 1897 Texas airship mystery. The pilot of that one balloon couldn't keep it aloft, and it hit the windmills of this fan on this judge's property, and the thing, powered by a gasoline combustion engine, just blew right up. It was aluminum clad. It blew up. There were shards of it that fell into the well, and then but this whole story grew up about this strange craft. Well, it was a craft that came down the day before in another city of Texas. And folks came running out to see what it was. They met the pilot. The pilot took off again. He fixed his craft and took off again. And this is what hit that. And this is what hit that. The fan blades that were powering that well pump on this property. And the judge who owned the property had gout. So his hand swelled up, and the lore surrounded it was that, he drank the water of the well, and he contracted the strange alien disease in his hand. No, it was gout, and his hands exploded.
Oh yeah, I saw the pictures of that guy's hands, and I could see where somebody would jump to that conclusion that he had some kind of radiation poisoning or something.
Yeah, when you look at your hands when you're having gout, and I've had this experience, it's like I can't have I can't have anchovies anymore because I'll get gout because the oil is so intense. When you see your hands explode, really puff up from it, it dawns on you that's what this judge must have had. And sure enough, his ancestor who he spoke to said, yeah, he had this condition, his hands would swell up if he ate the wrong food. That's gout.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring Johnny back into the conversation. We had to interrupt his story when we went to the break, and so Johnny, if you want to continue that, I think we left off where you had been picked up by these gentlemen and driven out to the desert. Turned around and you were faced with, I guess, a bunch of headlights?
Right. Like I said, there's 20 or 30, look like headlights across the street from us. And these two men, they said, we got to get out. You just sit still. And so John and I stayed in the car. Well, they met a man on the other side of the street. They met right in the middle of the highway, actually. And we could see them. They looked like in a fuss. They were passing words at one another. We couldn't hear what they were saying because the windows wouldn't roll down because without the switch on. So I told John, I said, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm going to find out. And so I went to open the door on my side. I was on the side that was off to the desert. On the right-hand side, the passenger side, in the back seat. And when I reached for the door to push it open, have you ever seen the television show, The Munsters?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There was a thing on there they called It. It was looked like a fuzzy creature. Well, something like that run up to the side of my door, and I slammed the door back. And I said, John, did you see that? He said, what is that? I said, I don't know what the hell it is. And I got to looking out the window. I got more interested in what that thing was and what they were doing. And it was just right there, like it was standing there waiting on me to get out of the car. And so I just sat there watching that thing. And all of a sudden, the two men come around, got back in the car. And I'm still watching. I asked them, I said, hey, what was that right there? And then one of them spoke. They didn't say nothing. And they got in the car, and I'm watching that thing as I'm leaving, and it's still there in the desert. And it looked like a furry bush, but it was moving because it came up to my door. And so they act like it wasn't there. And so anyway, they drove me back into Vegas and asked me to come over for a few minutes, and we went over to the apartment, and he said, "We just want you to do one thing." They finally got to talking. He said, "You said you sing music, right? Play music." I said, "Yeah, guitar, sing." He said, "You should write about this. Write about this." I said, "What's that about?" He said, "All of it." And I said, "Well, I hadn't thought about that." I said, "I really ain't interested in doing it." And they said, "Well, you should write about it." And one of them started telling me some words. He said, it was late night when you're speeding along and in the desert." And I said, "In the fire, yeah." I said, "Yeah, I could do something with that." And they said, "We'll put it together, and we'll see you tomorrow." And like I could do it right quick. So anyway, we left and went back to John's condominium. And so the next day I told John, I said, "We're going over and find out what these guys really want, because it made no sense. They never stopped where we told them to. All that going on across the street, all that seems a little weird to me." And he said, "Yeah, it is. Let's go get it straight." So we went back to this, where they were staying in this complex, and knocking on the door, and a custodian was coming down the hall. And he said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" I said, "No, we're here to see the Dunn, a group of people here." And he said, "Well, you're at the wrong room." I said, "No." I said, "They're in this one right here." He said, "No, there's nobody in that one." And I said, "Oh, yeah, they're in here." I said, "They may be gone off, but they're in here." And he said, "No, you don't understand. There's nobody in that at all." And I said, "Oh, yes, it is." And he said, "Well, you need to talk to the management." So we went down, me and John, to the office, and I explained what was going on. And I said, "These men," and she said, "Honey, you got to be a little confused here. Maybe it's another room." I said, "No, ma'am, it was there." I said, "I can tell you what it looks like and everything." And I began describing all the furniture, and she just looked at me shaking her head. And when I said, "And this beautiful is one of the prettiest fireplaces I think I've ever seen in my life," she said, "Now, wait a minute. You said a fireplace?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Come on with me." So we went back up the staircase and went down to that room, and she unlocked the door. And when she unlocked it, the room had absolutely not one stick of furniture whatsoever in the room. Nothing. It was completely empty. The only thing was in there that I had described was a fireplace. She said, "There's the fireplace you're talking about?" I said, "That's it." I said, "But what happened to all of the furniture?" She said, "There's not any furniture in here." She said, "There's not been in the past 6 months." She said, "The people that had this leased still have the lease on it, but they went back up north, and they have not made up their mind whether they're coming back or not, but they're holding the lease. So this is empty." I said, "Ma'am, it wasn't empty yesterday. It wasn't empty last night." So John, being a policeman, he started asking people down the hallway. He knocked on doors and asked them who was staying there. They had no idea of anybody being there. We asked outside, was anybody there? Was a moving van in there? They said there was no moving van in there. And that's when John began to wonder what's going on. So he got some friends to run a check to see if there was a Dave Dunn Productions in California. And there was no existence of any production company in California that was one under the name of Dave Dunn Productions.
Hmm. We've heard stories before about. I remember there was a story that some a lady, young woman at the time, told me about. She was walking up near Woodstock, New York, and she found this building and went to into the building and talked to some people, and then they made friends, and she wanted to go and visit them again. And when she returned to the building, it was like totally vacant and full of cobwebs, and it looked like nobody had. It was one of these places out in the country that had it looked like nobody had lived there for years. and there have been UFO sightings around there and all, and she had some.
All right, Tim, it's time.
It's
missing time for our break, so we'll continue this conversation in just a few minutes.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
And Tim, certainly two of the most electrifying guests, Bill Birnes and Johnny Sands. And in fact, Johnny tells some incredible stories about Elvis and Evel Knievel and the people, Rick Nelson and all that he knew and performed with on and off stage. What did you think of Evel Knievel, Johnny?
Evel was a character. He was I got to call him a self-made man. You never know what Evel Knievel would do next. I mean, he was just a strange guy, and now he was a long way from being a dummy. I don't mean it that way, but he was just nothing ever it never really meant much to him. Nothing that he done, he never felt like he ever really achieved it, and his ego stood in his way of his credibility. And
I guess he had a massive ego, as I understand it, right? I mean, he almost to a fault. Now, you did some stunt work. Did you ever get shot out of a cannon?
No, I never got the cannon part. Which I mean, that's more. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a dangerous stunt, but it's a cannon. I used to work with one. I just didn't have the desire to want to do it. But it's spring loaded, and it's set. You set it with using something of your own weight to set it to go to the distance that you want it to go. Now they have backfired, of course, but it was a spring load, so it really didn't. It didn't impress me too much. I did a stunt over Snake River Canyon where I hung on a cable upside down, half a mile out in the middle, over 1,200 feet in the sky, and walk it back.
You could have wished there were some UFOs protecting you around that time. I don't know. You weren't scared of heights. I mean, what made you decide to do something like that?
I like to daring stunts. I always like stunts. I started out with motorcycle stunts, and then I began to do high roof falls for cowboy pictures like the old Wild Wild West television show, Robert Conrad. I did a lot of stuff on that kind of show, and then I did a lot of stuff out there. We filmed a lot in old Tucson, Arizona, and up in Superstition Mountain. We had a studio up there called Apache Land Movie Studio. That's where we done Elvis Presley, a non-singing film called Charro, Charro. So I did a lot of the Western stuff, death drags from horses, that's where you fall off a horse and leave your foot hung in the stirrup and let the horse drag you down through the cactus and all. So lots of fun.
I think we've seen that a few times in the movies when we were kids. Although I think westerns are making a comeback. I noticed there are quite a few more of them, on Netflix and some of these pay-per-view channels. I saw one the other night that wasn't too bad called The Virginian, which we sat here and watched for a couple hours. I always liked the Western themes. I was the quick draw in the neighborhood with a cap pistol. That was my.
Yeah, I worked with. I was fortunate. I worked with Kurt Russell in a picture out in Las Vegas also, and we was doing a show called Then Came Bronson. I don't know if you remember that on TV.
Oh yeah.
But, I remember that, sure.
they rode a motorcycle. The boy rode the motorcycle all over the country, and he's always saving lives or doing something. It's heroic there. And so that was my first venture with Kurt Russell. And then I worked with Peter Fonda in California in a movie called Wild Angels. And I did a lot of motorcycle stunt work.
Oh man!
We had a reunion here about 8 years ago down in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Fox Theater, and Peter came and we was reunited there, and it was real great to see him again and be able to meet him. He was such a great guy, and I loved his dad too. So it was a good family.
Well, I'm so disappointed in the movies of today, because I always enjoyed this. A good stuntman makes a film, and today there's no stunt work. I mean, it's all computer animation. It's just, I mean, we got one movie there where the Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, is riding a missile across the ice. I mean, what kind of that's not stunt work. That's just done. It's done with a computer. There's no talent. Maybe the computer, I guess, graphics guys got talent, but what happened to the old days of real stunt work?
That was disappointing. We took the banging and the falls and we took all the danger, and we let the actor, sit on the sideline and be cool. It's kind of like I told Elvis when I did the stunt with Elvis. I told him I had to go to the hospital because I got cut up a little bit hitting a picket fence. And I told him, I said, this is kind of like that Jerry Reed song. He said, what song is that? I said, you got the gold mine, I got the shaft. No, they got afraid of stuntmen, and of course you can fake a stuntman a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot easier than you can create one. And there was some great stuntmen in my time there. Darl Robinson was a great stuntman. And there were several. Burt Reynolds was a great stuntman. Hal Needham was a great stuntman. These were some great guys back in my time.
Well, too bad you didn't get to talk to Elvis about UFOs, because I understand that Elvis was enjoyed a good UFO story from time to time and had a couple of sightings himself.
Well, I think when Dr. Feelgood got done with him there, he thought he could move clouds and everything at one time. And I mean, sad to say that. That's true. He was so messed up in the latter years when I went up there. I don't even know if he knew it was me or who he was talking to at the time. Because he was really in bad shape, and he kept his windows all tinfoiled up in his bedroom upstairs, and he kept day and night where he could be nighttime all the way around the clock for him. So he may get up at 6 o'clock in the evening. He may not get up, and his dad was going through a whole lot with him being that way. So he was really messed up. It was kind of a bad situation. Sad.
Well, I guess. Do you think that had anything to do with his being such a celebrity and people wanting so much out of him, or I mean, is that the cause you think of a lot of people doing, like celebrities you hear about end up getting on drugs, and some of them even, dying due to an overdose?
I mean, are you asking, do I think that's what make him the celebrity?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, do celebrities have it, harder? I mean, is that why you find out some celebrities have such a problem with drugs, do you think?
Well, I have experimented in my lifetime, hanging around with some of the people that I work with in Nashville. Some of them on heavy drugs, and to fit in with the clique, we'd all sit at the table and pass a joint, and then next thing you'd do is we'd pop a pill, and then before you know it, you're looking for it for your own, So I think it's you kind of fall into a lot of people where it's a lot of going on like that you can get your hands on it and you get yourself involved. I mean, that's my opinion.
Of course, today, marijuana is so commonplace everywhere. I mean, if you walk down my street in New York, people congregate in front of my building for no reason at all. They must know I'm upstairs or something. And you can all day long you can smell just the reefer coming up the stairways. It's very, very, very peculiar. We thought it was something that was resolved back in the '60s, and today it's probably more popular and profitable, right? Profitable than ever before.
Yeah, that's true. And them being at the bottom of your steps and all that smoke going up towards your place, it's a wonder you ain't seen something strange here lately.
Well, I don't inhale. That's my problem. People say, well, you should smoke for medicinal purposes because I got a lot of medical issues. And I said, I never got high on pot because I never smoked cigarettes. I never got high on pot. Well, maybe once or twice, okay. But yeah, I just never got it in my system. And never liked to inhale. I never found that enjoyable. And I choke. I just get it. If I smell smoke in the room, I end up coughing. So I don't know. I'm just weird. I got more allergies than you can shake a stick at. It's just
we'll be glad.
The way
be glad you got them.
Yeah. Hey, so Johnny, did you ever have a follow-up experience?
I had seen, after having an experience of seeing UFOs, yes, I had. I had seen several UFOs in flight. I've seen them come down. In North Carolina, I've seen one hovering about 100 feet off the ground. And I was in front of a church, and the church was going on. And I actually stopped the car. My wife was with me. And I went in the church and brought everybody out of the church outside and showed it to them. And it was sitting there hovering in the sky. And they thought somebody had built a tower up in the sky out there. And it was just, you could see the lights are rotating on it. And it was as big, almost half as big as a football field. That's how close it was.
Now, did you ever want to meet up with these guys again? The guys, I say, well, whatever they were that you first met there on your way to Las Vegas.
Oh well, yeah, I'd love to revisit the scene. Yeah, in fact, I said they helped me write the song. In fact, I got it on it. It's called "The Blue Diamond Highway," and I never put it out to all of those years. And I recorded that about 8 months ago, and put it in an album I've got. And
oh, wonderful!
And it's called "The Blue Diamond Encounter." And so, because I love for them to give the song that I come up with that they helped start. And in fact, when I put on it, writers, I put written by Johnny Sands and the Men in Black. So
well, too bad they couldn't come. Hey, in the old days, some of these contactees would come up with a great idea. They claimed that the alien voices would be on there or something. Remember, Bill Howard Menger did music from another planet. He sat there.
Oh,
at the,
Howard Menger. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Plugged it on a piano.
Yeah. Music, and UFOs seem to go hand in hand. I mean, there's so many performers in rock and roll. Well, that's of course the people I know being in that part of the business for some years ago. But just about everyone I know that was in the music profession had either an interest in UFOs or had some a story they wanted to talk about. I'd go in and I'd want to do an interview with somebody in the band, and they ended up doing the interview with me because they wanted to find out what was going on. Like Geezer Butler, I think he was the bass player for Black Sabbath. He had an incident, I think, out when he was living near Area 51, where this UFO came over and almost ripped the tiles off of the roof of the home out there they were staying in.
Well, so Elton John's one of his biggest rock songs is "Rocket Man."
Well, we got Jerry Lee Lewis. There's a song. Let's see, "Flying Saucer Rock and Roll." I think it was done in 1954 or something. And I'm looking at the credits. Jerry Lee Lewis is playing the piano on it. So we're going to have a show one night where we just play, Tim, we'll just play rock and roll UFO related music.
Well, I've got an old song that Jimmy Durante sang about let's go flying saucering, I think is how he put it.
Remember the old Stan Freberg takeoffs?
Oh yeah,
back in the 1950s, and it was like Santa Claus versus the UFOs and things like that. I mean, sure.
But you don't get too many. In those days. I remember growing up, there was always some song on the charts, a flying purple people eater, or even how much is that doggy in the window, where you could hear the lyrics, and there were quite a few songs that were related to UFOs. There was a UFO trucker song. I can't remember the name of it, but truckers and seeing flying saucers.
I don't remember that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're not a trucker.
No, it's not.
I know it was one they wrote that this UFO guy wrote it to his girlfriend. It said he kissed it between the hangers and it shot off through the air.
Hey, so Johnny, how do people find the album that the song is on?
They can get it through Hilltop Recording Studio, Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay, and geez, I wish we had a. You got a phonograph near the phone there?
Right. No, unfortunately, I sent you one. You didn't get it.
Yes, I did. But there's no way that I can play it here. We would have had to get it off to Tina. Well, we'll do that. We'll do that next time. We'll have
a picture of the alien on the.
I got the disc. You sent it to me, but I can't play it on the air because the show is actually produced in Las Vegas, and I'm here. Well, I'm not here in the Big Apple tonight, but what I was going to say is that photograph that you got on that on the album cover was the actual drawing that was made the night we were in Vegas there. Well, you sent me the original painting. I had the original painting, and I somehow I left it in the Syracuse newspaper did a story on this. You get a lot of press attention over the years about your case because you did have documentation on it where a lot of people that claim that they've had UFO experiences, they don't pass lie detector tests. They don't have these weird experiences, and they don't have the solid reputation that you do, either. So that story got a lot of attention, and of course, it still intrigues me. I don't know how many years we've known each other. Well, how many years ago since the actual incident?
Since it's been 40, almost 42 years.
Well, then we've known each other 42 years or something like that. I mean, wow,
yeah.
That.
And let me say this, why we do have the people's attention. 42 years ago, I told this story. Now, I told you I never done it. I never made money. So I'm telling you tonight, just as I told it in 1975, I've not made this up. What I have told you, these men in black, the disappearing and all of that is actual, the God's truth, and I stand on it firm. And I will take that with me to the grave because I did see what I see.
Well, we certainly believe you. Now, Bill, what to your way of thinking? I mean, you did 30, almost 40 episodes of UFO Hunters. What UFO contact experience? I mean, do you think is the most documented, or that you put the most faith in?
Well, I do think that the Roswell encounter is very documented. I think that RAF Bentwaters is documented, and in some cases, it's not just a documentation, but it's the documentation of the cover-up, the documentation of the exploration around the incident that's fascinating. I mean, I think that when you look at Roswell, when you look at Bentwaters, when you look at this Alan Godfrey story, when you look at which took place in the UK with his sighting, when you look at the Phoenix Lights, that's another one where that story again slowly gets uncovered over the years. I mean, just I think it was earlier this year, we had the revelation from Kurt Russell, from the actor Kurt Russell, that Johnny was talking about, that Kurt Russell, that we knew from the story from 20 years ago, that there was a private pilot who was flying into Phoenix, flying into Sky Harbor, right behind the lights, but nobody knew who the pilot was. And then just this year, Kurt Russell said that he saw a story and he realized he was the pilot. He was dropping off his son that had a date in Phoenix, and he had flown into Phoenix and then flown out, and he flew right behind and he saw the lights, and he was an eyewitness in the air behind the lights that night when those lights flew over the Paradise Valley in Arizona. Yeah. And so that story just comes back to the surface this year.
Incredible incident. Well, one of my favorite contact experiences, Carl Higdon, the hunter out there in Rawlins, Wyoming. It turns out that I've talked to his wife. They've got a book they are going to self-publish or put out in just a short amount of time, and we're going to have them on the show. And that, to me, that's another incredible encounter where he was out shooting elk. He was hunting elk, and the bullet hit some invisible force field, and he had a condition on his lung or kidney. And when he was taken to the hospital after his experience, it was all cleared up. And speaking of clearing up, Tim, we're almost at the end of another fascinating episode of Exploring the Bizarre. I think we're almost up to 120-something episodes now. And we keep on trucking, and we've had some of the best guests on the show, some fascinating subjects, and we've only just begun.
That's
and I want to thank our guests tonight, Bill Birnes and Johnny Sands.
Well, let me say this to you. Bill Birnes, when we went UFO Hunters, I have had contacts from all over the world because of Bill Birnes and the UFO Hunters related to the UFO show. I think it's aired maybe 16, 20 times, according to the people that I've heard. And that
episode on YouTube has got something like 120,000 views. So there you go. Well, we're waiting for the show to come back. It needs to come back on the air. There's got to be some decent UFO programming out there. And Bill
you
should
and me both.
lead the way.
I'm pushing it. I'm pushing it to this very day. We
Yeah.
have a few movies that are in development. We'll see what happens to them, but I do push that show. I'd love to take it back.
Yeah, we'd like to see it. And Tim, we'll be talking to you soon. And remember, our YouTube channel is Mr. UFO's Secret Files. And I want to thank everybody who works on the program: Tina, the producer; Peter, the animator; and Carol, who's our office assistant here. And bless you all. And we'll be talking to you all very soon with another episode of Exploring the Bizarre.
Good night.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.